The crystal chandeliers of Ashworth House blazed with 1,000 candles, casting golden light upon England's finest aristocracy. Miss Eliza Pemberton stood frozen at the ballroom's edge, her heart thundering as she watched her betrothed, Viscount Marcus Whitmore, lean intimately toward her own sister Charlotte across the dance floor, their whispered conversation punctuated by Charlotte's tinkling laugh. But what sent ice through Eliza's veins was not the sight itself. It was the moment Marcus's hand slipped around Charlotte's waist, and Charlotte did not pull away. Instead, she smiled, and then Marcus turned, his eyes meeting Eliza's across the crowded room, and he smiled too, a cold, deliberate smile that told her everything she feared was true. If you are listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what part of the world you're listening from. I want to know how far it has traveled. The morning light filtering through the tall windows of Pemberton Hall held the soft, silvery quality typical of an English spring in the year 1815. Miss Eliza Pemberton sat at her escritoire, quill poised above parchment, attempting to compose yet another letter expressing gratitude for yet another wedding gift. Around her, the room overflowed with evidence of her approaching nuptials. Bolts of French silk in ivory and pearl grey, boxes containing kid leather gloves and delicate chemises trimmed with Belgian lace. And everywhere, the scent of hothouse roses sent daily by her betrothed, Viscount Marcus Whitmore. At 23, Eliza possessed the kind of beauty that poets described as gentle. Chestnut hair that fell in soft waves, grey-green eyes that reflected thoughtfulness rather than coquetry, and a figure that, while pleasing, would never inspire the rapturous attention reserved for more striking beauties. She was the eldest daughter of the late Sir Edmund Pemberton, a baronet whose modest estate in Hampshire had provided comfort but not wealth. Her mother, Lady Pemberton, had died when Eliza was but 15, leaving her to navigate the treacherous waters of society and to help raise her younger sister Charlotte. Even thinking her sister's name brought a complicated tightening to Eliza's chest. At 19, Charlotte embodied everything society valued in a young woman: golden curls that caught the light like spun honey, cornflower blue eyes that sparkled with vivacity, and a figure that turned heads at every gathering. More than her physical beauty, Charlotte possessed an effortless charm that drew people to her like moths to flame. Where Eliza was thoughtful and reserved, Charlotte was spontaneous and vivacious. Where Eliza preferred the library to the ballroom, Charlotte lived for society's pleasures. Still at your correspondence? Charlotte's voice preceded her entrance into the morning room, bringing with it the scent of jasmine perfume. She swept in wearing a morning dress of primrose muslin that made her look like bottled sunshine. Honestly, Eliza, you've been writing thank-you notes for a fortnight. One would think you were composing a novel rather than simple pleasantries. Eliza set down her quill with careful precision. Gratitude should be expressed thoughtfully, not hastily. Gratitude, yes, but not obsession. Charlotte perched on the edge of the settee, her movements possessing the unconscious grace of a dancer. You should be enjoying this time, sister. You're marrying one of the most sought-after gentlemen in England. Viscount Whitmore could have had his pick of any lady in London, and he chose you. The words, though spoken with apparent affection, carried a subtle sting that Eliza had learned to recognize over the years. Charlotte never meant to wound, or so Eliza told herself, but her thoughtless observations often found the softest, most vulnerable places. I am sensible of the honor, Eliza replied quietly, turning back to her letter. Sensible? Charlotte laughed to sound like wind chimes. How very like you, dearest. You speak of marriage as though it were a business arrangement rather than a romantic adventure. But that was precisely what it was, a business arrangement, though one wrapped in the trappings of courtship. Viscount Marcus Whitmore was the heir to the Earl of Thornfield, a family whose lineage traced back to the Norman conquest and whose wealth derived from extensive holdings in Derbyshire and Yorkshire. At 32, Marcus cut an impressive figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples and eyes of an unusual amber brown. His features were classical, almost severe in their perfection, and his manner carried the easy confidence of a man who had never been denied anything he desired. He had begun paying attention to Eliza during the previous season, appearing at gatherings where she was present, soliciting her hand for dances, engaging her in conversation about literature and philosophy, subjects that interested her far more than the usual society prattle. When he had formally requested permission to court her, Eliza's father had been overjoyed. When 3 months later, Marcus had asked for her hand in marriage, it had seemed like a fairy tale. Except fairy tales were not supposed to feel quite so uncertain. "I confess I don't understand your reserve," Charlotte continued, examining her perfectly manicured nails. "Marcus is everything a woman could want. Handsome, wealthy, titled, cultured. And he clearly adores you, sending flowers every day, arranging for your wedding at his family's estate. Why, half the ladies in London would trade places with you in an instant." "Perhaps one of them should," Eliza murmured, so quietly she wasn't certain she'd spoken aloud. "What was that?" "Nothing. Merely wool gathering." Charlotte rose and crossed to where Eliza sat, placing delicate hands on her sister's shoulders. "You're nervous, that's all. Every bride feels anxious before her wedding. But truly, Eliza, you must cast off these melancholy thoughts. In less than a fortnight you'll be Viscountess Whitmore and someday Countess of Thornfield. You'll have everything. Everything except the certainty that her betrothed loved her for herself rather than for the convenient docility she represented. But such thoughts were uncharitable, even disloyal. Marcus had been attentive throughout their courtship. If his kisses lacked passion, well, that was proper for an engaged couple. If his conversation sometimes felt more like examination than intimate exchange, that merely showed his intellectual nature. If he occasionally looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher, something between satisfaction and calculation, she was surely imagining things. The afternoon brought a visit from Marcus himself, arriving in his elegant barouche precisely at 3 o'clock, as planned. He greeted Eliza's father with respectful warmth, inquired after the household's well-being, and presented Eliza with yet another bouquet of roses, white this time, symbolizing purity and new beginnings. "My dear Miss Pemberton," he said, taking her hand and pressing it to his lips with practiced gallantry, "I trust I find you well." "Very well, thank you, my lord." "Excellent. I've come to finalize the arrangements for our engagement ball at Ashworth House. My parents are most eager to celebrate our union publicly before the wedding." His thumb traced a small circle on the back of her hand, a gesture that should have felt intimate but somehow left her cold. "It will be the event of the season. Everyone who matters will attend." Charlotte, who had materialized the moment Marcus was announced, floated into the room with her most charming smile. "How wonderful, Lord Whitmore! An engagement ball at Ashworth House. The townhouse is legendary for its ballroom." Marcus's gaze shifted to Charlotte, and Eliza noticed something flicker in his expression, a warming, a softening she rarely saw when he looked at her. "Miss Charlotte, you grow lovelier each time I see you. That shade of yellow becomes you remarkably well." A faint flush of pleasure colored Charlotte's cheeks. "You're too kind, my lord." "Not at all. I speak only truth." He held Charlotte's gaze a moment longer than strictly necessary before returning his attention to Eliza. "Now then, my dear, shall we discuss the guest list? I want to ensure all your particular friends are included." They spent the next hour reviewing details: flowers, musicians, the supper menu, the order of dances. Marcus had opinions on everything, delivered with the absolute certainty of someone accustomed to command. Eliza found herself agreeing to arrangements she might have questioned, choosing acquiescence over confrontation. It was easier, and besides, what did it matter whether the roses were pink or coral, whether they waltzed or performed a cotillion first? As Marcus prepared to depart, he drew Eliza aside for a private word. "You seem distracted today," he observed, his amber eyes examining her face with unsettling intensity. Is something troubling you? No, my lord. Simply the usual pre-wedding nerves, I suppose. Ah, his lips curved in what might have been a smile. You must not worry, my dear. I have everything well in hand. Your role is simply to look lovely and to remember that you're about to become one of the most envied women in England. You do understand how fortunate you are, don't you? The question, asked in a tone of gentle condescension, sent a chill through her. I am conscious of the honor you do me, my lord. Good, very good. He lifted her hand again, turning it over to press a kiss to her wrist, just above where her glove ended. His lips were warm against her skin, but his eyes remained cold. I've chosen well, I think. You'll make an admirably proper Viscountess. Biddable, grateful, unlikely to cause difficulties or embarrassments. Something in his words struck her as odd, almost insulting, but before she could formulate a response, he had released her hand and was taking his leave, pausing only to bestow another warm smile upon Charlotte before departing. That evening, as Eliza prepared for bed, she stood before her mirror and studied her reflection with critical eyes. Was she truly so unremarkable, so conveniently biddable? The woman looking back at her seemed a stranger, someone playing a role in a drama she hadn't auditioned for, speaking lines written by someone else. She thought of Marcus's words, unlikely to cause difficulties or embarrassments. Was that truly the sum of her appeal? Not her mind, which she knew to be sharp, not her kindness, which she had cultivated carefully, not even her modest beauty. Simply her compliance, her gratitude, her willingness to occupy the space allotted to her without complaint or ambition. For the first time, a small, treacherous voice whispered in the back of her mind, "Is this truly what you want?" But what she wanted had never been particularly relevant. She was the daughter of a baronet of modest means, now deceased. She had a younger sister to see settled, a household to maintain, a position to uphold. Marriage to Marcus offered security, status, and the fulfillment of her duty. What more could she reasonably expect? The answer, she told herself firmly, was nothing. She should be grateful, she should be joyful. She should not be lying awake in the darkness, wondering why her engagement felt less like a beginning and more like an ending. The night of the engagement ball arrived with the inevitability of fate. Ashworth House, the London residence of the Earl and Countess of Thornfield, blazed with light from every window, a beacon visible from streets away. The townhouse, built in the previous century, embodied Georgian elegance at its finest. 4 stories of Portland stone, with a double-curved staircase leading to an entrance flanked by Corinthian columns. Inside, the ballroom stretched the length of the first floor, its walls covered in cream silk damask, its ceiling adorned with plasterwork depicting scenes from classical mythology, and 3 massive chandeliers casting prismatic light through thousands of crystal pendants. Eliza stood in an antechamber off the ballroom, making final adjustments to her gown, while Charlotte fussed over her own appearance in a nearby mirror. Lady Thornfield, Marcus's mother, had insisted on commissioning Eliza's engagement ball gown from London's most fashionable modiste, and the result was undeniably magnificent. Ivory silk embroidered with seed pearls in an intricate pattern of roses and vines, with an overlay of gossamer tulle that shimmered with every movement. Eliza's hair had been arranged in an elaborate style adorned with fresh white roses, and around her neck hung the Whitmore betrothal necklace, an heirloom piece featuring diamonds and sapphires that felt heavy with the weight of family expectation. "You look like a princess from a storybook," Charlotte declared, smoothing the skirts of her own gown, a confection of azure silk that matched her eyes and emphasized her golden beauty. "Marcus will be speechless when he sees you." Eliza managed a smile, though her reflection showed a woman who looked more like a doll than a person, beautifully dressed but somehow lifeless, her eyes holding a distant quality that makeup couldn't disguise. Lady Thornfield swept in, a formidable woman in burgundy silk and rubies. "It's time," she announced, her tone brooking no argument. "The guests have assembled. Lord Whitmore is waiting to make the formal announcement. Come." The walk to the ballroom felt surreal, as though Eliza were floating outside her own body, watching someone else move through these motions. The double doors opened, and a hush fell over the assembled company. Easily 300 of London's most distinguished citizens all turned to observe her entrance. Marcus stood at the centre of the room, magnificent in black evening clothes with a silver waistcoat. He smiled as she approached, that public smile he wore so well, and extended his hand. She placed hers in his, feeling the cool press of his fingers around hers. "Ladies and gentlemen," the Master of Ceremonies announced, "Viscount Marcus Whitmore and his betrothed, Miss Eliza Pemberton." Applause rippled through the crowd as Marcus led her into the first dance, a waltz, that scandalous German dance that had finally gained acceptance in the highest circles. His hand settled at her waist, and they began to move through the familiar patterns. "You look adequately presentable," Marcus murmured, his tone suggesting he was commenting on the weather. "The necklace suits you. You should be honored. My mother doesn't loan the Whitmore sapphires to just anyone." "I am honored, my lord," Eliza replied automatically. "Good. Remember to smile more. You look severe when you don't smile. It's important that people see you as a gracious future viscountess, not a blue-stocking who would rather be reading." She forced her lips into a curve, feeling it sit falsely on her face. Around them, other couples had joined the dance, the ballroom becoming a kaleidoscope of color and movement. Eliza caught glimpses of familiar faces, friends from previous seasons, distant relatives, family connections, all watching her with varying degrees of interest and envy. When the waltz concluded, Marcus led her to the side of the room where his parents held court. The Earl of Thornfield, a silver-haired man with the same amber eyes as his son, greeted her with distant courtesy. "Miss Pemberton, my son has made an acceptable choice. I trust you understand the responsibilities that come with the Whitmore name." "I shall endeavour to fulfill them, my lord," she said quietly. "See that you do. We have standards to maintain." The evening progressed with mechanical precision. Eliza danced with Marcus's friends and associates, all of whom offered congratulations that felt hollow, as though they were going through expected motions. She smiled until her face ached, accepted compliments she didn't believe, and played the role of happy bride-to-be with increasing exhaustion. Charlotte, meanwhile, was in her element, her laughter floating above the music as she charmed every gentleman who approached. Eliza watched her sister with a complicated mixture of affection and something darker, not quite envy, but a recognition of the fundamental difference between them. Charlotte belonged in this glittering world in a way Eliza never would. Charlotte shone. Eliza merely reflected light. It was nearly midnight when Eliza excused herself to catch her breath, slipping through a side door into one of the mansion's many corridors. She needed a moment away from the stifling attention, from the weight of performance. She wandered until she found a small retiring room, empty and blessedly quiet, and sank onto a velvet chair, pressing her fingers to her temples. "There you are." Marcus's voice startled her. He entered without knocking, closing the door behind him with a soft click that sounded ominous in the silence. "Running away from your own engagement ball? How disappointing. I merely needed a moment of quiet, my lord. The crowds are there for you. The least you can do is appreciate the honor." He moved closer, and Eliza caught the scent of brandy on his breath. He'd been drinking more than she'd realized. "Do you have any idea what this evening cost? What arrangements I've made on your behalf? I am grateful." "Are you?" He leaned down, bracing his hands on the arms of her chair, caging her in. "Sometimes I wonder if you truly appreciate your good fortune. A nobody from Hampshire, daughter of a deceased baronet with barely enough property to maintain a decent establishment, and I, who could have married an earl's daughter, a duke's niece, chose you." His words, delivered with cold precision, struck like physical blows. Eliza's chest tightened, making breathing difficult. "My lord, you're frightening me." "Frightening you?" He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You haven't even begun to understand what our marriage will be, my dear. Let me make things clear. You will be my wife, yes, but you will also be exactly what I require. Obedient, quiet, and conveniently occupied with household matters while I manage my affairs as I see fit. You will produce an heir or two, you will maintain appearances, and you will never, ever question my decisions. Do you understand? Tears burned behind Eliza's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. This is not the man I agreed to marry. No, his smile was cruel. Then you're even more naive than I thought. I'm exactly who I've always been. You simply saw what you wanted to see, a romantic hero from one of your novels. But I am a practical man, Eliza, and this is a practical arrangement. Your gratitude and compliance in exchange for position and security, that is the bargain. Before she could respond, the door opened and Charlotte appeared, her face flushed from dancing. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." She stopped, taking in the scene, Marcus looming over Eliza's chair, Eliza's pale face and wide eyes. For a moment, something flickered in Charlotte's expression, concern, perhaps, or recognition. "Miss Charlotte," Marcus said smoothly, straightening and stepping back. "Perfect timing. Your sister was feeling overwhelmed. Perhaps you might keep her company while I return to our guests." He glanced back at Eliza, his expression hardening. "Compose yourself and return shortly. People will talk if the bride-to-be remains absent much longer." After he left, Charlotte rushed to Eliza's side. "What happened? You look pale as death." "Nothing. Everything. I don't know." Eliza's voice trembled despite her attempts at control. "Charlotte, I think I've made a terrible mistake." "What do you mean?" "This is everything we've hoped for. For you, perhaps. You've hoped for status and position. But I hoped for more." Charlotte's expression shifted, becoming defensive. "Well, perhaps you've been reading too many romantic novels. This is the real world, Eliza. Marriage isn't about love and passion. It's about security and advancement. Marcus is offering you everything, and you're being ungrateful." The words, so similar to Marcus's own, felt like betrayal. Eliza looked at her sister, truly looked, and saw something she'd been refusing to acknowledge for months. The way Charlotte's eyes lit up when Marcus entered a room, the way she angled for his attention at family gatherings, the way she defended him, always, regardless of context. "You care for him," Eliza said slowly, the realization settling over her like cold water. "You care for Marcus. Don't be absurd. He's your betrothed. I would never—" But Charlotte's face had flushed crimson, giving lie to her words. "Does he know?" "There's nothing to know." Charlotte's voice rose, defensive and sharp. "You're imagining things. You're overwrought from the evening's excitement. Come, let me help you repair your appearance, and we'll return to the ball together." But as Charlotte fussed over Eliza's hair and gown, neither of them could quite meet the other's eyes. They returned to the ballroom together, and Eliza resumed her role, smiling, dancing, accepting congratulations. But something fundamental had shifted. She watched Marcus now with new eyes, seeing the calculation beneath his charm, the coldness beneath his courtesy. And she watched Charlotte, seeing the longing poorly disguised as sisterly concern. It was during a country dance, when the figures briefly separated partners, that she overheard the whispered conversation. Two society matrons thinking themselves unobserved behind their fans. Such a curious match. One wonders why Whitmore chose the elder sister when the younger is so much more suitable. Perhaps that's precisely why. Miss Charlotte would be too independent, too much her own person. Miss Eliza will be infinitely more manageable. The words confirmed what Marcus himself had told her, but hearing them from others made them somehow more devastating. She was chosen not for any quality she possessed, but for the qualities she lacked: beauty, vivacity, spirit. The evening ground toward its conclusion. The formal toasts were made, the cake was cut, the final dance was performed. Through it all, Eliza moved with mechanical grace, a clockwork bride performing her appointed functions. It was only as the guests began to depart, as she stood in the receiving line beside Marcus, thanking people for their attendance, that the worst moment came. A latecomer appeared, Lord Ashford, a notorious gossip with a reputation for cruel wit. "Whitmore!" he boomed, his voice carrying across the thinning crowd. "Quite the spectacle tonight. Though I must say I'm surprised by your choice. When you told me last month you were planning to marry, I assumed you meant the pretty one." The remaining guests fell silent, every eye turning toward them. Marcus's hand tightened painfully around Eliza's, but his smile never wavered. "Careful, Ashford. That's my betrothed you're discussing." "Oh, no offense meant. Simply an observation. Still, can't say I understand it. But then, they say the plain ones make better wives, more grateful, you know, less likely to stray." Laughter rippled through the crowd, some embarrassed, some malicious, all of it humiliating. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face, felt every eye upon her, measuring, judging, confirming what Ashford had so publicly articulated. She was the plain one, the grateful one, the one who should be thankful for any attention at all. Marcus's response was smooth, dismissive, designed to move past the awkward moment, but the damage was done. As the last guests finally departed, as the servants began cleaning the ballroom, Eliza stood amid the ruins of her illusions and understood with perfect clarity she was not loved, she was not even particularly wanted, she was merely convenient. And somewhere in the emptying ballroom, Charlotte met Marcus's eyes across the space, and neither looked away. The morning after the engagement ball dawned grey and cold, matching Eliza's internal landscape. She had not slept, had spent the night staring at the ceiling of her bedroom at Pemberton Hall, replaying every humiliation, every cruel word, every knowing look exchanged between Marcus and Charlotte. By the time dawn broke, she had made a decision. She could not marry Marcus Whitmore. The realization brought both terror and relief in equal measure. To break an engagement was social suicide, particularly when the engagement had been so publicly celebrated. She would be labeled jilt, her reputation destroyed, her chances of any other respectable marriage eliminated. But the alternative, binding herself for life to a man who saw her as convenient property, who likely harbored feelings for her own sister, was unbearable. She dressed carefully in a traveling costume of deep green wool and packed a single trunk with essentials. Then she penned 3 letters. The first to Marcus was brief and formal. "My lord, I find I cannot proceed with our engagement. Please accept my sincerest apologies for any inconvenience. I am releasing you from all obligations. E.P." The second to her father was more difficult. "Dearest Papa, forgive me. I cannot marry Lord Whitmore. I am going to stay with Aunt Agatha in Bath for a time until the worst of the scandal passes. Please do not worry. I'm quite well, merely certain I was making a mistake. Your loving daughter, Eliza." The third to Charlotte remained unwritten. What could she say? "I know you love him. Take him with my blessing." How could you? In the end, she left no letter at all for her sister. By mid-morning, she was in a hired post-chaise, rattling westward toward Bath, leaving behind the wreckage of her reputation and the life she'd been expected to live. Aunt Agatha Pemberton lived in an elegant townhouse on the Royal Crescent, that magnificent sweep of Georgian architecture overlooking the city. She was her father's elder sister, a widow of independent means and decidedly independent opinions. Eliza had always adored her. Though Lady Pemberton had disapproved of Agatha's unconventional views, the woman read radical philosophy, attended scientific lectures, and maintained that women possess the same intellectual capabilities as men, given proper education. When Eliza appeared on her doorstep, dishevelled and near tears, Agatha took one look at her niece and said simply, "Come in, child. We'll have tea, and then you'll tell me everything." An hour later, sitting in Agatha's comfortable morning room overlooking the Crescent's gardens, Eliza had poured out the entire story. Marcus's coldness, his calculated choice of her as a convenient wife, the humiliation at the ball, and her growing suspicion about his feelings for Charlotte. Agatha listened without interruption, her intelligent grey eyes, so like Eliza's own, sharp and assessing. When Eliza finally fell silent, drained and exhausted, Her aunt set down her teacup with decisive force. "Well," she said briskly, "thank heavens you've developed some sense before it was too late. Breaking the engagement was absolutely the right decision. But the scandal will be a 9-day wonder, nothing more. Society has a remarkably short memory, particularly in Bath, where we're more concerned with philosophy and science than with London gossip. Besides," she added with a wry smile, "you've underestimated something crucial, my dear." "What's that?" "You've done Viscount Whitmore a favour. Now he's free to pursue the woman he actually wants, your sister, without the complication of an inconvenient wife. Within a month, I predict he'll be courting Charlotte openly, and within 3 months, they'll be engaged themselves. The scandal will shift from you to them, and you'll be forgotten in the drama of the new romance." The prediction stung, but Eliza recognized its likely truth. "And I'm to simply accept that? Watch my sister marry the man I was engaged to? If he's the man you described, cold, calculating, willing to marry one woman while desiring another, then yes, absolutely. Consider it a fortunate escape. Charlotte is welcome to him. They deserve each other." Agatha leaned forward, taking Eliza's hands in her own strong ones. "Listen to me carefully, my dear. You are 23 years old. You possess intelligence, education, and now freedom. The question is not what you've lost, but what you're going to do with what you've gained. I don't understand. You've been living the life others expected of you, dutiful daughter, compliant sister, grateful fiancée, but you're none of those things anymore. The scandal has freed you from expectation, so I ask you, what do you want?" The question was so unexpected, so novel, that Eliza found herself speechless. What did she want? She'd spent so long trying to be what others needed that she'd never considered her own desires. I don't know," she admitted. "Then it's time you found out." Agatha stood, moving to her writing desk and retrieving a stack of papers. "Bath is not just a watering place for invalids, you know. It's become quite the intellectual centre. We have a philosophical society that meets weekly, a ladies' scientific salon, and a lending library with the most progressive collection outside London. I propose you stay with me for the season, not hiding in shame, but engaging with life. Let society talk. Meanwhile, you discover who Eliza Pemberton truly is." Over the following weeks, Eliza found herself drawn into a world she'd never known existed. Agatha's circle included bluestockings and reformers, writers and naturalists, women who discussed Wollstonecraft and Bentham over tea, who debated the implications of Davy's chemical discoveries and argued about the proper interpretation of classical texts. For the first time in her life, Eliza's intelligence was not something to hide or apologize for. It was valued, celebrated, demanded. She attended lectures at the Philosophical Society, where she heard papers on geology, astronomy, and political economy. She joined a women's reading circle that was working through Milton's Paradise Lost, engaging in spirited debates about free will and moral responsibility. She spent hours in the lending library, devouring books on subjects she'd never been encouraged to study: natural philosophy, ancient history, contemporary politics. And slowly, gradually, she began to feel like herself. Not the diminished, grateful self she'd performed for Marcus, but a fuller, richer version, someone with opinions and passions and intellectual curiosity. It was at one of these Philosophical Society lectures that she first encountered Dr. Callum Reid. The lecture topic was recent advances in agricultural chemistry, and Eliza had attended more out of loyalty to Agatha than genuine interest. But when the speaker was introduced, Dr. Callum Reid recently returned from studying the latest farming innovations in Scotland and the Low Countries, she found herself paying attention. Dr. Reid was not classically handsome in the way Marcus had been. He was perhaps 30, of medium height and lean build, with auburn hair that looked as though it frequently defied attempts at styling, and eyes of a warm hazel that held both intelligence and humour. His clothes, while well-made, were those of a gentleman farmer rather than a London dandy. Practical, rather than fashionable. When he spoke, his voice carried the soft burr of someone who'd spent time in Scotland, and his passion for his subject was immediately evident. The future of England, he argued, depends not on military might or political maneuvering, but on our ability to feed our people efficiently and sustainably. The innovations in crop rotation, the understanding of soil chemistry, the improvements in livestock breeding, these are the true revolutions of our age. After the lecture, Agatha insisted on introducing Eliza to the speaker. "Dr. Reed, may I present my niece, Miss Eliza Pemberton. She's recently come to Bath to expand her education." "Miss Pemberton." He bowed, his manner easy and unaffected. "I hope the lecture wasn't too tedious. Agricultural chemistry isn't the most glamorous subject." "On the contrary," Eliza found herself saying, "I found your argument about sustainable practices particularly compelling. Though I confess, I wondered whether the initial investment required for such innovations might be prohibitive for smaller landholders." His eyes lit up with genuine interest. "An excellent question. Yes, that's precisely the difficulty. The solutions I've been developing—" He caught himself laughing. "Forgive me, I tend to become carried away. I doubt you wish to discuss crop yields over tea." "Actually," Eliza said, surprising herself, "I would very much like to hear more." And so began a series of conversations that stretched over the following weeks. Dr. Reed, it transpired, was the younger son of a baronet educated at Cambridge, who had devoted himself to practical applications of scientific principles to agriculture. He managed his family's estate in Wiltshire and consulted with progressive landowners throughout the south of England. He was passionate about education, believing that scientific knowledge should be disseminated widely rather than hoarded by universities. He treated Eliza not as a decorative object to be admired, but as an intellectual equal whose opinions and questions had value. "You have a remarkably analytic mind," he told her one afternoon, as they walked through the Royal Crescent Gardens. "Have you considered writing? There's a great need for accessible texts explaining scientific principles to general audiences." "I've never thought myself capable of such work," she admitted. "Why not? You grasp complex concepts quickly, you ask incisive questions, and you express yourself with clarity. Those are precisely the qualities needed." He paused, studying her with those warm hazel eyes. "May I ask you something perhaps too personal?" "You may ask. Why do you diminish yourself? Every time you express an intelligent thought, you immediately undercut it with some dismissive remark about your own capabilities. Who taught you to make yourself small?" The question struck with unexpected force, bringing sudden tears to her eyes. "Everyone," she whispered. "My entire life I've been taught that my value lies in being convenient, undemanding, grateful for whatever attention I receive." "Then you've been taught wrong." His voice was gentle but firm. "You are not a convenience, Miss Pemberton. You are a person of considerable intellect and character. Anyone who cannot see that is blind." It was the most affirming thing anyone had ever said to her. And in that moment, something shifted in Eliza's heart. A dangerous, hopeful flutter she recognized with both joy and alarm. She was developing feelings for Dr. Callum Reed. The realization terrified her. She had barely escaped one disastrous engagement. She had no business entertaining romantic thoughts about anyone, least of all a gentleman who was probably simply being kind to his friend's traumatized niece. But despite her attempts at rationality, her heart refused to listen. She found herself looking forward to philosophical society meetings with embarrassing eagerness. She dressed with more care on days when she might encounter him. She found excuses to seek his opinion on books she was reading, questions she was pondering. And when he smiled at her, that warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes, she felt a happiness she'd never experienced with Marcus. Agatha, naturally, noticed everything. "You're falling for him," she observed one evening after Dr. Reed had departed following a lengthy discussion about Malthus's population theories. "I am not. Don't insult my intelligence, child, and don't panic. Callum Reed is nothing like Marcus Whitmore. He's a good man, honest, intelligent, principled. If you're going to lose your heart, you could do far worse. But I'm ruined, Eliza protested. A scandal, a jilted engagement. What respectable gentleman would want me now? One who values substance over society's arbitrary rules. One who sees your worth rather than your supposed shame. Agatha smiled. Give it time, my dear. Let things develop naturally. And for heaven's sake, stop assuming you're unworthy of good fortune. That's Marcus's voice in your head, not the truth. As spring deepened towards summer, letters from London arrived with news of the expected scandal. Marcus had, exactly as Agatha predicted, begun courting Charlotte almost immediately. Society was divided, some scandalized, others amused, still others claiming they'd known all along that Whitmore preferred the younger sister. Eliza's father wrote with bewildered hurt, unable to understand why she'd refused such an advantageous match. Charlotte wrote not at all, but in Bath, far from London's judgment, Eliza discovered something she'd never expected, herself. And in Dr. Callum Reed's company, she glimpsed something even more unexpected, the possibility of genuine partnership built on mutual respect and intellectual companionship. The possibility, in short, of love. Summer arrived, and with it, an invitation that made Eliza's heart sink. The Duke of Somerset was hosting his annual midsummer ball at his estate outside Bath, and Aunt Agatha had been invited, with the explicit instruction to bring her interesting niece. "We don't have to go," Agatha said, reading Eliza's expression accurately. "The Duke is an old friend, but he'll understand if we decline." "No." Eliza straightened her shoulders, drawing on reserves of courage she hadn't known she possessed. "I've been hiding long enough. If I'm to truly embrace this new life, I cannot skulk in the shadows forever. That's my girl. Besides," Agatha added with a knowing smile, "Dr. Reed will be there. The Duke is one of his clients. He's implementing Callum's agricultural innovations on the Somerset estates." The night of the ball, Eliza dressed with particular care in a gown of deep emerald silk that Agatha had insisted on commissioning. Nothing like the insipid pastels deemed appropriate for young unmarried ladies, but a rich, sophisticated colour that brought out the green in her eyes and complemented her chestnut hair. Agatha's lady's maid had arranged her hair in a Grecian style, simple but elegant, with a single emerald comb as ornament. "You look like a woman, not a girl," Agatha pronounced with satisfaction. "Confident, self-possessed. Let them all see what Marcus Whitmore was too blind to appreciate." Somerset House was ablaze with light as their carriage approached, and Eliza felt her courage waver. This was different from Agatha's intimate intellectual gatherings. This was society, with all its rules and judgments. What if people cut her? What if she became the object of whispered speculation and pointed fingers? But as they entered the ballroom, something unexpected happened. The Duke himself approached immediately, his weathered face creasing in a warm smile. "Miss Agatha. And this must be the remarkable Miss Pemberton I've been hearing so much about. Doctor, Reed speaks highly of your intelligence." From there, a stream of introductions followed, not the artificial courtesy of London society, but genuine warmth from people who valued substance over scandal. The Bath set, it seemed, cared less about broken engagements and more about scientific debates and literary discussions. She was engaged in conversation with a botanist's wife about the illustrations in Curtis's botanical magazine when a familiar voice interrupted. "Miss Pemberton, I had hoped to find you here." Dr. Callum Reed stood before her in formal evening wear, and Eliza's breath caught. He had always been attractive in an understated way, but tonight, with his unruly auburn hair tamed and his hazel eyes warm with pleasure, he was genuinely handsome. "Dr. Reed," she managed a curtsy despite her suddenly unsteady legs. "How delightful to see you." "The delight is mine, I assure you. I wonder, might I have the honor of the next dance?" It was a waltz, that intimate, controversial dance that had caused such scandal when first introduced. As Callum's hand settled at her waist and his fingers closed around hers, Eliza felt a jolt of connection so different from anything she'd experienced with Marcus. Where Marcus's touch had been cold possession, Callum's was warm invitation. Where Marcus had led with dominance, Callum led with partnership. "You look beautiful tonight," he said quietly as they moved through the turns, "though you always do. But there's something different, a confidence I haven't seen before." "Perhaps I'm finally becoming who I was meant to be," she replied, surprising herself with the truth of the statement. "Then I'm honored to witness the transformation." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Miss Pemberton, Eliza, if I may be so bold, I wonder if you've noticed that our encounters have become the favorite part of my days." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I have hoped that might be the case, as they have become the favorite part of mine. Then perhaps I might speak plainly." At her nod, he continued, his voice low and earnest. "I am not a wealthy man, despite my family connections. My passion is agriculture and scientific advancement, not the most romantic of pursuits. I have neither title nor particular distinction, but I have means enough to provide comfort, and I have—" He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I have come to care for you deeply, more than I thought possible." "Callum," she whispered, using his given name for the first time, "you need not answer now. I know you've had a difficult time. I simply wanted you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I would be honored to court you properly. With no calculation, no convenience, no conditions. Simply because I find you remarkable and wish to spend my life in your company." Before Eliza could respond, a commotion at the ballroom entrance drew everyone's attention. The late arrivals were announced: Viscount Marcus Whitmore and Miss Charlotte Pemberton. The waltz continued, but Eliza stumbled, her body going rigid. Callum steadied her, his hand firm and reassuring at her back. "Easy," he murmured. "You're safe, you're among friends, and you owe them nothing." As the dance concluded, Eliza forced herself to look across the ballroom to where Marcus and Charlotte stood, resplendent and golden, drawing attention like moths to flame. Marcus was as coldly handsome as ever, Charlotte as beautiful, and they made a striking couple, much more visually matched than she and Marcus had ever been. Marcus's gaze found hers across the crowd, and for a moment something flickered in his amber eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at seeing her looking so well, so confident. Then his expression hardened into its familiar calculating mask. Charlotte's face was more transparent. Guilt and defiance warred in her features as she took in Eliza's presence, Eliza's elegant appearance, and particularly Eliza's proximity to the handsome gentleman at her side. "Shall we face them now and be done with it?" Callum asked quietly. "Or would you prefer to avoid confrontation?" "Now," Eliza decided. "I won't hide." They crossed the ballroom with deliberate purpose, and Eliza was aware of the eyes following them, the whispered speculation. But with Callum's steady presence at her side and Agatha materializing protectively nearby, she felt stronger than she had in months. "Marcus, Charlotte." She was pleased to hear her voice emerge steady, even cool. "What an unexpected surprise to see you in Bath." "Eliza." Marcus's tone was cordial, but contained a subtle warning. "You're looking well. Rustic life seems to agree with you." The condescension in rustic was clear, a dismissal of Bath's intellectual society compared to London's fashionable one. Before she could respond, Callum spoke up. "Miss Pemberton has been an invaluable part of our philosophical community here. Her insights into political economy have been particularly noteworthy. But then, Lord Whitmore, you likely never had the opportunity to discover Miss Pemberton's intellectual gifts, given your brief acquaintance." The subtle jab, implying that Marcus hadn't known Eliza well enough to appreciate her, hit its mark. Marcus's jaw tightened. "On the contrary, I knew Miss Pemberton quite well enough to recognize that she was perhaps not suited to the demands of the position I was offering." "How fortunate, then, that she escaped such an ill-suited match," Callum returned smoothly. "One should only marry where there is genuine affection and respect. Wouldn't you agree, Lord Whitmore?" The tension between the two men was palpable, and Eliza found herself both alarmed and secretly thrilled that someone was defending her, challenging Marcus's casual dismissals. Charlotte, who had remained silent, finally spoke, her voice brittle. "Sister, you seem to have recovered remarkably well from your disappointment." "I have," Eliza agreed. "It's amazing how clearly one can see once freed from unsuitable expectations. Tell me, Charlotte, how are the wedding plans progressing? I assume you and Marcus are engaged by now." The direct question caught them both off guard. Charlotte flushed crimson, while Marcus's expression grew even colder. "We are indeed engaged," he confirmed. "The announcement will be made formally next week." "I'm sure you wish us well. I wish you exactly what you deserve," Eliza said, the ambiguity deliberate. The Duke of Somerset appeared then, diffusing the tension. "Whitmore, good of you to come. Though I'm surprised to see you in Bath, I had heard you preferred London society." "We came specifically to attend your ball, Your Grace," Marcus replied, smoothly pivoting away from the uncomfortable conversation, "and to see some old friends." But as the group dispersed, Marcus managed to catch Eliza alone for a moment near the refreshment table. "You're making a mistake," he hissed, his public charm vanishing. "That country doctor is nobody. He can offer you nothing, no position, no consequence. You could have been a viscountess, eventually a countess. Instead, you'll be the wife of a gentleman farmer, living in rural obscurity. See, better rural obscurity with a man who values me than gilded prominence with one who sees me as convenient property." Eliza shot back, finding her courage. "You did me a favor, Marcus, though you didn't intend to. You showed me exactly what I didn't want in a marriage, and now I'm free to choose what I do want. And you think it's that Reed fellow? Don't be naive. He's being kind to you out of pity. No man of sense would actually choose shop-worn goods when he could have." "That's quite enough." Callum appeared beside Eliza, his normally affable expression hardened with anger. "You will not speak to Miss Pemberton in that manner." "And who are you to tell me—" "I am the man who sees her true worth, which is apparently more than you were ever capable of." Callum's voice remained low, controlled, but edged with steel. "Now I suggest you return to your fiancée before people notice her future husband haranguing his former betrothed." Marcus's face flushed with impotent rage, but he was trapped by the same social conventions he'd always used to his advantage. He could not cause a scene without damaging his own reputation. With a curt nod, he stalked away. Eliza found she was trembling, adrenaline coursing through her. "Thank you," she whispered to Callum. "Always." He offered his arm. "Come, let's get you some air." They walked onto the terrace, where the cool night breeze carried the scent of roses from the gardens below. Other couples strolled about, maintaining propriety, but Callum led her to a quieter corner, where they could speak privately. "I'm sorry you had to witness that," Eliza said. "I'm sorry you were drawn into such sordid drama. Don't apologize. I'm only sorry that you ever doubted your own worth enough to consider marrying that pompous—" He caught himself, laughing shakily. "Forgive me. That's uncharitable. But Eliza, you must know that everything he said was wrong. You are not shop-worn goods. You are not lucky to receive whatever scraps of attention men deign to offer. You are intelligent, kind, beautiful, and worthy of genuine love and respect." "Do you truly believe that?" she asked, searching his face. "With all my heart." He took her hand in his, a gesture that would have been scandalous in London, but felt perfectly natural here. "Eliza, I meant what I said earlier. When you're ready, if you're ready, I would be honored to court you. Not because you're convenient or biddable or any of those insulting terms Whitmore used, but because I admire you, because our conversations are the brightest part of my days, because when I imagine my future, I cannot help but hope you might be in it." Tears spilled down Eliza's cheeks, not tears of humiliation or pain, but of relief and tentative joy. "I think," she said carefully, "that I would very much like to be courted by you, Dr. Reed. Callum, if the offer is sincere, more sincere than anything I've ever said." He reached up, gently wiping away a tear with his thumb. "I'm not a lord, And I cannot offer you a position in the first ranks of society, but I can offer you partnership, respect, and a life of purpose and meaning. If that's enough, it's everything, she interrupted. It's everything I never knew I wanted until I met you. They stood there on the terrace, hands clasped, the future suddenly bright with possibility. Behind them, the ballroom buzzed with speculation and gossip about Marcus and Charlotte, about the broken engagement, about the notorious Miss Pemberton who had somehow landed on her feet. But for the first time in her life, Eliza didn't care what society thought. She had found herself. And in finding herself, she had found someone who loved her, not despite who she was, but because of it. The weeks following the Somerset ball brought a flurry of developments that would have seemed impossible mere months earlier. Marcus and Charlotte's engagement was formally announced in the London papers, causing the predicted scandal. Society was divided, some calling it romantic that Marcus had found his true love, others deeming it tasteless that he'd shifted his affections so quickly from one sister to the other. But Agatha's prediction proved accurate. The drama of the new romance soon overshadowed the broken engagement, and Eliza found herself gradually fading from the centre of gossip. Meanwhile, Callum's courtship proceeded with a steadiness that Eliza found both comforting and thrilling. He called at Agatha's townhouse 3 times a week, always with some intellectual pretext, a new book he thought she'd enjoy, an invitation to a lecture, a question about a philosophical point they'd been debating. But beneath the propriety, something deeper was building, a connection based on mutual respect, shared interests, and a growing affection that felt nothing like the hollow performance of her engagement to Marcus. One afternoon in late July, Callum arrived with a particular purpose evident in his manner. Agatha, with her usual astuteness, immediately excused herself on some transparent errand, leaving them alone in the morning room. "Eliza?" Callum began, then paused, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "I've been corresponding with my family, specifically with my elder brother who holds the baronetcy. I've told him about you." Eliza's heart skipped. And he's invited us, you, me, and Miss Agatha as chaperone, to visit the family estate in Wiltshire. He wants to meet the woman who's captured his younger brother's attention so thoroughly." "Captured your attention?" she echoed, a smile tugging at her lips despite her nervousness. "Completely and irrevocably." He crossed to where she sat, and with careful propriety took the chair beside her rather than remaining at a formal distance. "Eliza, I know we've only been acquainted a few months. By society's standards, perhaps I should wait longer before speaking. But I'm not a man who believes in unnecessary delay when I'm certain of my feelings, and I am certain." He reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box. Eliza's breath caught. "This was my mother's," he said, opening the box to reveal a ring. Not an ostentatious display of wealth like the Whitmore sapphires, but a simple band of gold set with a single pearl surrounded by small diamonds. "It's not grand or fashionable, but it has been in our family for 3 generations. My father gave it to my mother, and he gave it to me before he died, telling me to present it only to a woman I loved with my whole heart. Callum, I love you, Eliza Pemberton. I love your intelligence and your kindness. I love the way you question assumptions and pursue knowledge with such passion. I love your courage in standing up to those who diminished you. I love the way you laugh at my terrible puns and the way you furrow your brow when you're concentrating on a difficult concept. I love who you are, and I love who you're becoming." He took a shaky breath. "Will you marry me? Not to become a viscountess or to secure your position, but simply to build a life together as partners and equals." Tears streamed down Eliza's face. Happy tears this time, the kind that came from overwhelming joy rather than pain. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as though it had been waiting for her all along. Then, with careful tenderness, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was nothing like the cold, possessive kisses Marcus had bestowed. This was warm and genuine, a promise rather than a claim. When they finally drew apart, both were trembling slightly. and Eliza found herself laughing through her tears. "I never imagined I could be this happy." "Neither did I, but we shall be, I promise you, not without challenges, of course, but we'll face them together." Agatha, who had undoubtedly been listening from the hallway, chose that moment to re-enter with a tea tray and a knowing smile. "Well, do I offer congratulations?" "You do indeed," Callum confirmed, his arms settling naturally around Eliza's shoulders. "Excellent. Then let's have champagne instead of tea. This calls for proper celebration." The visit to the Reed family estate, Thornbury Manor, took place in early August. Eliza approached it with some trepidation. She could not forget her last experience being presented to a gentleman's family when the Earl of Thornfield had looked at her with such cold assessment. But Thornbury Manor, while elegant, was nothing like the imposing grandeur of Ashworth House. It was a comfortable Georgian building of honey-coloured stone, surrounded by well-tended fields and experimental agricultural plots. Sir James Reed, Callum's elder brother, greeted them with warm informality. He was perhaps 40, with the same auburn hair as his brother, but more conservatively dressed, his manner that of a country squire rather than a London gentleman. His wife, Lady Margaret, was a plump, pleasant woman with laugh lines around her eyes and dirt under her fingernails from her evident love of gardening. "Miss Pemberton!" Lady Margaret embraced Eliza as though they were old friends. "We're so delighted to meet you. Callum has written such glowing accounts of your intelligence. You must tell me about the Philosophical Society's discussions. We get precious little intellectual stimulation in rural Wiltshire." The warmth was genuine, without artifice or calculation. Over the next 3 days, Eliza met Callum's extended family. Nieces and nephews who climbed on him with gleeful abandon, elderly aunts who peppered her with questions about Bath society, and tenant farmers who spoke of Callum with genuine affection and respect. On the second evening, Sir James invited Eliza for a walk in the gardens. "I wanted a private word," he explained, "about my brother's prospects." Eliza braced herself for warnings about Callum's modest income or concerns about her scandalized past. Instead, Sir James said, "Callum is the finest man I know. He could have lived a life of leisure on the family income, but he chose to dedicate himself to improving agricultural practices, work that benefits not just our estates, but every farmer who implements his innovations. He's published papers, consulted throughout the south of England, and single-handedly increased our estate's productivity by 30%, while improving soil quality." "I know," Eliza said quietly. "His dedication is one of the things I most admire about him. Good, because he'll never be wealthy in the way London society measures wealth. Oh, he has comfortable means, enough for a pleasant home, travel, books, all the necessities and some luxuries. But if you're seeking position and consequence, you should know now that Callum's path leads away from London society towards something more meaningful but less flashy. Sir James, I was recently engaged to a man who had wealth, position and consequence in abundance. I was miserable. Your brother offers something infinitely more valuable: respect, partnership and genuine affection. If you're worried I'll try to change him or lure him towards society life, please don't be. I have no desire to return to that world. I've found something far better here." Sir James studied her for a long moment, then smiled. "Callum said you were remarkable. He was right. Welcome to the family, Miss Pemberton." The engagement was announced in the Bath papers in mid-August. The London papers picked up the story, of course. The scandalous Miss Pemberton, who'd broken her engagement to Viscount Whitmore, was now betrothed to a country gentleman of no particular distinction. The gossips had a brief field day, but the commentary was more puzzled than cruel. Most concluded that Eliza had simply resigned herself to a lesser match after losing Whitmore, never suspecting that she considered herself immensely fortunate. One piece of correspondence did arrive that gave Eliza pause, a letter from Charlotte. She opened it with trepidation, unsure what to expect. "Dearest Eliza, I owe you an apology I scarcely know how to express. I was wrong. Wrong to encourage Marcus's attention, wrong to believe that position mattered more than character, wrong to let my own selfish desires cloud my judgment about your happiness. I thought I loved him. I thought his attention was proof of my worth. But now, as our wedding approaches, I find myself wondering if I've made a terrible mistake. He is not cruel, exactly, but he is cold, controlling. He speaks to me as he must have spoken to you, as though I should be grateful for his notice, compliant with his wishes, decorative but not substantive. I see now what you tried to escape, and I confess I am envious, dear sister, not of the title you lost, but of the freedom you gained. You chose courage over convention, and you found genuine happiness. I chose convention over courage, and I fear I've trapped myself in a gilded cage. I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope more that you can be happy. If your Dr. Reed is as good a man as the reports suggest, then you've won a far greater prize than any I could claim. Your sister, Charlotte Eliza, read the letter twice, feeling a complicated mixture of emotions, vindication, pity, residual hurt, and a strange kind of closure. She showed it to Agatha, who read it with pursed lips. "Poor foolish girl," Agatha pronounced. "She'll have to make her bed and lie in it now. One can only hope she finds some contentment in her choice." "Should I write back?" Eliza wondered. "That's entirely your decision, my dear. You owe her nothing, least of all forgiveness she hasn't fully earned. But if you wish to extend an olive branch, I won't discourage you." In the end, Eliza did write back, a brief note expressing hope that Charlotte would find happiness and leaving the door open for eventual reconciliation, though making clear that trust would take time to rebuild. It was the best she could do. The wedding was planned for late September, to be held at the parish church in Wiltshire, near Thornbury Manor. It would be a small affair, family and close friends only, nothing like the grand society spectacle Marcus had orchestrated for their engagement ball. Eliza found herself looking forward to it with uncomplicated joy. The day before they left Bath for Wiltshire, Agatha presented Eliza with a gift, a beautiful leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. "For your writing," Agatha explained. "Callum was right. You have a gift for explaining complex ideas clearly. I think you should use it. Write about your experiences, your observations on society and marriage and women's position. Perhaps it will help others who find themselves trapped as you were." "Do you really think I could?" "My dear girl, you've already proven you can do anything you set your mind to. You escaped an intolerable engagement, rebuilt your life, found genuine love, and emerged stronger than you began. Writing a few essays will be simple by comparison." As Eliza packed her belongings for the journey to Wiltshire and her new life, she took a moment to reflect on the extraordinary transformation of the past 6 months. She had entered the year as Miss Eliza Pemberton, dutiful daughter and grateful fiancée, prepared to sacrifice her own happiness for security and position. She was leaving it as the future Mrs. Callum Reed, partner to a man who valued her mind as much as her person, embarking on a life of purpose and meaning. The golden cage had been opened, and she had chosen to fly. Spring in Wiltshire arrived with a profusion of wildflowers and the sweet chaos of lambing season. Mrs. Eliza Reed, she would never tire of that name, stood at the window of the comfortable study she shared with her husband, watching Callum in the fields, consulting with their estate manager about the season's planting. Even after 6 months of marriage, the sight of him made her heart lift with quiet joy. Their home was a gracious manor house called Meadowbrook, part of the Reed family holdings but separate from Thornbury, providing them with independence while keeping them close to family. It was smaller than Pemberton Hall had been, certainly nothing compared to the grandeur of Ashworth House, but Eliza loved every corner of it, from the well-stocked library where she spent her mornings writing, to the experimental greenhouse where Callum tested new cultivation techniques, to the cozy bedroom they shared, where they talked late into the night about everything and nothing. The life they'd built together was exactly what Callum had promised, a partnership of equals. He consulted her on estate decisions, valuing her quick grasp of accounts and logistics. She accompanied him on visits to tenant farms, learning about agriculture and suggesting improvements based on her reading of progressive texts. Together, they hosted monthly salons, bringing together local progressive thinkers to discuss philosophy, science, and reform. And she had begun to write. What had started as journal entries reflecting on her experiences had evolved into a series of essays on women's education and marriage reform. Agatha had helped her find a publisher in London willing to release them pseudonymously, and to Eliza's amazement, they had found an audience. Letters arrived from women across England expressing gratitude for words that articulated their own frustrations and hopes. There you are. Callum entered the study, bringing with him the scent of fresh earth and spring air. He dropped a kiss on the top of her head before reading over her shoulder. Another essay? On the importance of women having independent means, even in marriage. I'm arguing that complete financial dependence creates a power imbalance incompatible with true partnership. Quite right too, though I may be biased, given that my wife's book income now rivals my consulting fees. He said it with pride rather than resentment. We're building quite the radical household. Scandalous, really, she agreed, turning in her chair to smile up at him. A wife who writes for publication, a husband who believes in crop rotation and women's rights. Whatever would London society think? Let them think what they like. We're far too busy being happy to care. It was true. The life they'd chosen, intellectually stimulating, purposeful, removed from society's artificial concerns, suited them both perfectly. They had friends among progressive thinkers, reformers, and scientists. They travelled to attend lectures and visit innovative estates. They read voraciously, debated passionately, and planned improvements to both their land and their community. A letter arrived that afternoon that brought news from London. Charlotte's letter, the first in several months. Eliza opened it with some trepidation. Dear Eliza, I write to inform you that I am with child. The announcement will be made publicly soon, and I wanted you to hear it from me directly. Marcus is pleased, as is his family. I am expected to produce an heir, and I shall fulfill that function as required. You will note my choice of words: function, required, fulfill. This is what my life has become, sister. A series of duties performed for the satisfaction of others. I am Viscountess Whitmore, and soon I shall be a mother, and I have every material comfort one could desire. I am also profoundly lonely. Marcus is not cruel, as I've said before. He is simply absent. He provides handsomely. He appears at my side for public events. He fulfills his marital obligations with mechanical regularity. But there is no warmth, no real companionship. I'm a decorative object in his home, valued for my beauty and my ability to produce heirs, but not for anything essential to who I am. I think of you often, in your country manor with your gentleman farmer. I imagine you laughing together over books, discussing ideas, building something meaningful, and I confess I am desperately envious. You tried to warn me in your way. You showed me by your own choice what mattered, but I was too vain and too foolish to understand. I do not write seeking pity or even forgiveness, though I would treasure both. I write simply to tell you you were right about everything. And I hope, dear sister, that you are blissfully happy, because at least one of us should be. Your sister, Charlotte Eliza, read the letter aloud to Callum, who listened with a furrowed brow. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment before speaking. It's a sad business. I almost feel sorry for Whitmore. He schemed and calculated to get exactly what he wanted, and now he's trapped in a marriage as empty as the one he tried to force on you. Though I feel sorrier for your sister, who's paying the price for her choices. Should I invite her to visit? Eliza wondered. After the child is born, perhaps? Would that be inappropriate? You're allowed to show kindness to your sister, even if she behaved badly toward you. Besides, he added, pulling her close, you're one of the most forgiving people I know. If you want to offer her friendship, I won't object. Just don't let her convince you that you made the wrong choice. You didn't. I know. She leaned into his embrace, feeling his heartbeat steady against her cheek. I've never been more certain of anything. In May, Agatha came to visit, her arrival bringing the usual whirlwind of opinions, observations, and affectionate interference. She pronounced Meadowbrook charmingly civilized for a country establishment, and Eliza's marriage the most sensible decision you've ever made, which I say with full awareness that I encouraged it shamelessly. One afternoon, as they walked through the gardens Eliza had been cultivating, Agatha raised a delicate subject. Have you heard the latest London gossip? We're rather removed from London gossip here, which suits us admirably. Yes, well, this particular gossip concerns your former betrothed. Apparently Viscount Whitmore has been keeping a mistress in a discreet establishment in St. John's Wood. It's all very hush-hush, of course, but these things always get out. Poor Charlotte is reportedly visiting family in the country while being quietly devastated. Eliza stopped walking, processing this information. How awful for her, to be humiliated so, especially while expecting a child. Indeed, though I confess I find it grimly satisfying that Whitmore's cold calculation has gained him exactly what he deserves. A fashionable marriage, an heir on the way, and a profound emptiness at the center of his life. He could have had genuine partnership with you, you know, if he'd been wise enough to value it. Instead, he chose beauty and compliance, and discovered too late that those qualities don't create happiness. I feel I should write to Charlotte, Eliza said slowly. Not to gloat, certainly, but to offer, I don't know, solidarity, understanding. You're a better woman than I am, Agatha declared. I'd be tempted to send a polite note saying I told you so. But yes, offering compassion is probably the nobler course. Just remember, my dear, that while you can offer kindness, you cannot save her from the consequences of her own choices. She must live the life she's made. That evening, Eliza did write to Charlotte, a genuine letter this time, not merely a polite acknowledgement. She wrote about her own marriage, careful to be honest without seeming to boast. She wrote about partnership and respect, and the quiet joy of building a life with someone who valued her completely. She wrote about the importance of finding meaning beyond social position, and she offered tentatively the possibility of future reconciliation when Charlotte was ready. Whether Charlotte would accept the offered hand remained to be seen, but Eliza had extended it, and that was enough. Summer brought a new development. Eliza's first book, published under the pseudonym A Lady of Hampshire, was released to surprisingly positive reviews. Reflections on marriage and partnership argued for reform in women's legal and social position, drawing on Eliza's own experiences without revealing identifying details. It sparked debate in progressive circles and was denounced by conservative publications, which Agatha declared the surest sign of success. You're becoming quite influential, Callum observed, reading a favorable review in a reform periodical. My wife, the radical philosopher. Hardly a philosopher. I merely write about what I've observed and experienced, which is precisely what the best philosophy does, examines life honestly and draws reasonable conclusions. I'm immensely proud of you, you know, not just for the writing, but for your courage in pursuing it, despite knowing some will disapprove. I learned from the best, she said, kissing him. You showed me what it means to dedicate oneself to meaningful work, regardless of society's opinion. I'm simply following your example. The autumn brought an unexpected visitor, Marcus Whitmore himself, arriving in an elegant carriage with the Thornfield crest, requesting an audience with Mrs. Reed. Callum's expression darkened. You don't have to see him. No, I think I do. I'm curious what he wants. And besides, she added with more confidence than she felt, I'm not the same woman he knew. I can face him now without fear. She received Marcus in the drawing room, with Callum pointedly present. Marcus looked older, she thought, fine lines appearing around his eyes and mouth, his expression carrying a weariness she didn't remember. Mrs. Reed, he said formally, thank you for seeing me. I know I have no right to your time, No, you don't, Eliza agreed coolly. But I'm curious about your purpose in coming. Surely we have nothing left to discuss. Perhaps not, but I found I needed to acknowledge something. He paused, seeming to struggle with unaccustomed humility. I wronged you. I see that now, though I confess I didn't at the time. I chose you for all the wrong reasons. Your gratitude, your compliance, your willingness to be molded into the wife I thought I needed. And when you found the courage to refuse me, I convinced myself you were making a mistake, throwing away your chance at position and consequence. I was, Eliza said quietly. Throwing it away, I mean. Deliberately and with full awareness. Yes, and in doing so, you gained something infinitely more valuable. A partnership built on genuine affection and respect. While he glanced at Callum, then back to Eliza. I gained exactly what I thought I wanted and discovered it's worth nothing at all. Why are you here, Whitmore? Callum asked bluntly. If you're seeking absolution, you're asking the wrong person. Eliza owes you nothing, least of all forgiveness. I'm not seeking absolution. I'm offering acknowledgement, and perhaps a warning to anyone else who might make my mistake. He looked directly at Eliza. You were right to refuse me. You deserved far better than I was capable of offering. I see that now, when it's too late to matter. I hope you're happy, Mrs. Reed. Truly, you've earned it. After he left, Eliza sat quietly for a long moment, processing the encounter. I think, she finally said, that was as close to an apology as Marcus Whitmore is capable of offering. Do you forgive him? Callum asked. I'm not sure forgiveness is relevant. He's a man trapped by his own calculation and coldness, living a hollow life of his own making. I don't hate him. I don't even particularly think about him anymore. I'm simply grateful I escaped before it was too late. And your sister? Charlotte made her choice with open eyes. I hope she finds some contentment, but I cannot save her from the consequences. I can only offer friendship if she ever truly wants it. As winter approached, Eliza received an invitation that made her smile, an invitation to speak at the Bath Philosophical Society about women's education based on her published essays. The girl who had once hidden her intelligence to appear more marriageable was being asked to share her ideas publicly, to contribute to important debates about society's future. Will you come with me? She asked Callum. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. I want to see you up on that podium, terrifying conservative thinkers with your radical notions of women as fully human beings with minds of their own. Terrifying. Exactly the reputation every lady hopes to cultivate. You're not trying to be a lady anymore, love. You're trying to be yourself, and yourself is magnificent. The night before they left for Bath, Eliza stood at her study window, looking out over the winter landscape, fields lying fallow, waiting for spring's renewal, smoke rising from tenant cottages, the dark ribbon of the river winding toward the horizon. This was her life now. Not the glittering ballrooms of London or the sterile elegance of a great house, but something far more valuable, a life of purpose and partnership built on mutual respect and genuine affection. She thought of herself a year ago, standing in Ashworth House ballroom, frozen with horror, as she watched Marcus and Charlotte together, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. That girl had been so afraid, so convinced of her own inadequacy, so desperate to please and perform and fulfill others' expectations. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who knew her own worth, who had chosen courage over convenience, who had built a life on her own terms, a woman who wrote radical essays and managed estates and loved deeply and laughed often, a woman who had learned that the golden cage, no matter how gilded, was still a cage, and that freedom, even if it came at the cost of position and status, was worth any price. Behind her, Callum entered the study, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? How far I've traveled, how much I've changed, how extraordinarily lucky I am. Not lucky, he corrected gently. Brave. You made choices when choices were difficult. You chose yourself when everyone told you to choose duty. That wasn't luck, my love. That was courage. She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had seen her true worth when she'd barely begun to recognize it herself. We're going to have a good life, aren't we? We already do. But yes, it's going to keep getting better, because we're building it together, as partners, as equals, as people who love each other not for what we can provide, but for who we are. And standing there in her study, in her home, in the life she'd chosen rather than accepted, Eliza knew he was absolutely right. She had grabbed the Earl's hand, or in her case the gentleman farmer's hand, and he had indeed never let her go. But more importantly, she had never let go of herself. She had bloomed where she'd chosen to plant herself, and the garden she'd cultivated was more beautiful than any she'd been offered. If this story moved you, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share in the comments where in the world you're listening from. I love knowing how far these stories of courage and transformation travel. And remember, true happiness comes not from accepting the life others design for you, but from having the courage to design your own.